We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Tezvav in volume 15, the Sicha for Chov Mar Cheshvan, the 20th day of Cheshvan. And the Rebbe brings down right here in the Sicha on the star that that's the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, the Shmos Eden, in the year Tov Reish Chov Aleph. And his the history, the biography of the Rebbe Rashab in detail, the Rebbe points to the Chanoich Lanar. One could ask, what's the connection to a birthday every year? So the Rebbe brings down, as the person grows older a year, actually they, even though they passed away, their life continues to grow every year. The Kapitel Tilim increases. The Rebbe brings down from the writings of the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, in Chof Mar Cheshvan Tovshin Hey. So over there in the Likutei Sichos, and he's quoting over there that the previous Rebbe said that in his dream he saw his father, Kedushas Amur, and he told him that during this Meis Leis, I turned 84 years, turned 85, from the time that my soul came down to the world. That's the Rebbe Rashab telling his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the way it is, the Seder, the order is that each one of our of the Rebbes and our holy fathers is going to says a drush, an expounding, the drush, a maimer, on the pasuk of the Kapitel Peidalet. So the fact that the Rebbe Rashab says he turned 84 then, even though that's 80, he was passed away already, the Rebbe Rashab at that time. And saying that it's his 85th, turned 85, he filled 84 years, even though he passed away, that is evidence that the elevations that take place on a birthday also apply after the passing. So therefore, the birthdays that we celebrate, it's not only an old remembrance, but actually the Rebbe grows older in the elevation, goes higher every year on the birthday. And further, it says here that this Sicha that the Rebbe we're going to be learning over here is actually been printed already in Lashon Kodesh. This Sicha is in Yiddish, but the Lashon Kodesh version has been printed in the Hisofis in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Yudalit. But it says that here there is changes and there's additions. So this is the Sicha, what we're going to be learning over here. This Sicha, we're going to discuss the two versions. We know that in the Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba, it says that they don't have menucha, whether it is tzaddikim or tamidei chachomim. These are the two versions. The Rebbe is going to explain how it seems first that it mostly talks about tamidei chachomim because Torah has no limit. Mitzvahs, on the other hand, have a limit. So it seems more fitting. Talmidei Chachamim, Ein Lemenucha, they don't have. They always keep on going. Mechayel El Choyel. But what about mitzvahs? Seems more fitting. Loshen Talmidei Chachamim. But then the Rebbe explains how by mitzvahs it's also there's a connection to the Ein Sof, and the Rebbe brings down further from the Rebbe Rashab, from the ones whose birthday the Rebbe is giving this Fabrengen in honor. That he brings down that even mitzvahs are applicable. The Rebbe talks about whether Olam Haba means Gan Eden or it means Olam Atchiyah, the two times of Olam Atchiyah, and various different details as we'll see in the Sicha. Let's look inside, and we're going to go step by step. Aleph. In the Maimer Razal B'Siyum Masechet Brachos, in the saying of our sages of blessed memory, in the end of brachas, the similar ending is also when al derech zeh b'sim mesechet moed kodesh. So there are two versions in this statement. either number one, Talmidei Chachamim, that we're talking about Talmidei Chachamim. And we're saying Talmidei Chachamim ein la menucha loy b'olam hazeh v'loy b'olam haba chulu. They have no rest, not in this world, not in the world to come. So we're talking about primarily, or the translation of Talmidei Chachamim means scholars, meaning it's associated with Torah learning. Now, those who learn Torah don't have rest, not in this world, not in the world to come. But Beis, there is a second version that says Tzadikim ein lahem menucha chulu. And also this version there says the Girsa vet gebracht bekam mekoymes. It's also brought down in many places. What's the difference if we say Talmidei Chachamim or Tzadikim is whether it's associated with the level of Torah or it's in general the level of good deeds, tzidkes of Maisim Tovim. V'yesh loimer, so we can say, as the Unterschied in Loshen from the Gersois, that this difference in the language is how the version is, diktois and Unterschied in Zeir Teichen, that also expresses a difference in the content. So it's not just a way to express it by using the word tzadikim, using Talmidei Chachamim, but we're actually talking about a different content. According to the Girsa Talmidei Chachamim don't have rest. So this specific saying of our sages of blessed memory is talking about a specific advantage that is only exists in the study of Torah. Talmidei Chachamim, we're talking about the Talmidei Chachamim. Come on, as the Rebbe will explain why Talmidei Chachamim specifically, which actually is fits that they don't have a rest. But the other version, the other, as opposed to the version Tzadikim ein lahem menucha chulu, we are not discussing here the separate advantage of the study of Torah. Warum der Toyar Tzadik is koilel in sich euch morin uvdin tovin was eine nitke Talmidei Chachamim. Because when we describe somebody as a tzaddik, that also includes people who are masters of good deeds, of mitzvahs. Was eine nitke Talmidei Chachamim? They're not Talmidei Chachamim. So that means that it means something different. That included in the version tzaddikim is not talking about a special advantage of Talmidei Chachamim. We're saying any tzaddik doesn't have menucha. So what is it? What's the difference? Darf man verstehen dem Tam Achiluk zwischen den zwei Shittas. So we have to understand what's the difference, whether we say Talmidei Chachamim, that it's a special advantage associated with a scholar, with learning, or it's something which applies to everybody, that all tzaddikim ein lahem menucha, have no rest, lo b'olam hazeh, lo b'olam haba. So what's the difference? So, as Rabbi explains in his base, we understand about Talmidei Chachamim because Torah is limitless. So there's no menucha. Torah is limitless. Those who study Torah are also constantly busy learning Torah, which is endless. So they're always learning Torah. But mitzvahs are, on the other hand, are limited. So what does it mean in la menucha? Base. Those of us Talmidei Chachamim ein la menucha chulu is that Arizal Masbir in Likutei Hashas. That Arizal explains in Likutei, in the collection of the Shas. Ki be'olam shalachar hamisa, because he says, quoting from the Arizal, that in the world that is after the Talmidei Chachamim oiskim b'Torah, the scholars, they occupy the study Torah. Olim memadrega lemadrega, yeshiva liyeshiva. They go up from one level to the other level, from one academy to another academy. They keep on going higher. Just as the blessed name Hashem has no end, so the teaching Torah has no end, so keep on going higher and higher. Like them is verstandig, so the Girsa, the explanation of the Arizal, we understand that time from the Girsa Talmidei Chachamim ein lahem menucha chulu, we understand the reason for the version Talmidei Chachamim ein lahem menucha. For in Davke Torah, because this has to do with Talmid Chachamim, because this is specifically Torah. The Signan Hayidua, using the known language, Chefza from Mitzvah's Talmud Torah. The object of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is B'bchinas Ein L'Sof. It's an object. Torah has no end. It's an endless object. And because the object is endless, so the one who studies Torah, that's why there's no rest and there's no end to the aliyahs fun gavra. So the person who studies Torah from mitzvah Talmud Torah, from the mitzvah learning Torah, there's no end because the object has no end, so the mitzvah has no end. And therefore, we understand so that's why we say Talmid Chachamim Menucha, because it has association specifically to the Torah. Torah ain't lo sof, so those who learn Torah also don't have a sof, and that's Ein Menucha. Aber mitzvahs, but when we're talking about mitzvahs, Hagam Euch ze sein in Zewin von Ebersten, was is ain't so. Although they too are instructions that Hashem, who is infinite, has given them, was is ain't so. Von deswegen is in their lane, in their Chefza for Anagbola. But yet, in the mitzvah themselves, in the object of the mitzvah, there is a limit. Unlike Torah, which is limitless, the object of mitzvahs has a limit. But not only is there a limit, as Muzayin Agabola, there must be a limitation. In mitzvahs as a whole, can't add to mitzvahs, can't take away, and each particular mitzvah. Sai close a mitzvah, whether it is in the general mitzvahs, on which we have been instructed, don't add on it and don't diminish from it, or the other part, don't add and don't diminish. That's general mitzvahs. Under Shomer is Talmud Torah, but the Torah is different. You have to always add how much you understand. So, as it says in the laws of Talmud Torah, that a person needs to constantly increase and make more. But mitzvahs are limited. How many mitzvahs? And also, each specific mitzvah has its limitations. Tefillin davke 4 parshas. Tefillin must have specifically 4 portions, not 5. Or not 5 itself. So, because the objects of the mitzvahs are limited, so the person that does them is also limited. The far is by Gavra von andere mitzvahs. Also by the person who does the other mitzvahs besides the Torah. So, which is limitless. But the other mitzvahs that are limited, Morin Uvdin Tovin, which are the masters of good deed, those Soifu Menucha. That's why there is an end and there's relaxation, because they're associated with fixed mitzvahs that are fixed in their ways. Those hays, that means it's very funny, menucha, ve'en menucha. The idea whether there is rest or there is no rest, seine behessen zu the zwei Beginnes von Gvul ublivu. That is associated to the level. If it's limited, that means that there is menucha, there is rest. If it's limited, there is no rest. So, that is the gimel. Al-Gerach Zeh is auch der Unterschied zwischen Zeh, Torah Mitzvahs benegei dem Eufen von Chiyachi und von Adam Gabra. So this is as the mitzvah themselves, whether they have a limit or don't have a limit. Is there an end or not? Torah has an end, no end. Mitzvahs have an end. What about the person that does the mitzvahs? The same thing. The Torah mitzvahs. We gave them Eufen Achi von Adam Gabra as the obligation from the person doing the mitzvah. The obligation of studying Torah has no limitation. In Lashon Rambam, as the Rambam says, everybody, no matter what kind of person you are, what your level, rich or poor, and there's also no time bound. There's no limitations. Rambam writes in Lashon Rambam, Kol ish mi Yisrael chayim b'talmud Torah. Every Jewish person is obligated to study Torah. Bein oni, bein ashir, whether you're poor, whether you're wealthy. Bein shalom begufe, bein bal yisurim chulu, whether your body is complete or not. Unoich bisman, and also as far as the time, when the obligation is the chiyuv the mashtendiket. The obligation of the person is a constant one. It's always, you're always obligated to learn Torah. Anders is over in mitzvahs. But it's different when it comes to mitzvahs. Was jeder mitzvah hat sich ihr Hagbola. Every mitzvah has its limitation. In a bestimmten Zman, in a specific designated time or mokim or place, so the gleichen are similar to this. So there is limitations there. So Torah versus mitzvah in the object. Torah is limited and mitzvahs are limited. And as far as the person, a person is obligated to study Torah nonstop. The person has a defined time and place when he does mitzvahs. So we see how Talmidei Chachamim in Lemenucha, but so what about tzaddikim? How could it be in Lemenucha? Dalet leidem is over schwer zu verstehen. So according to this, however, it's difficult to understand the time for the girsa, the reasoning of that version from or the shita that tzaddikim and lemenucha. Tzaddikim don't have any rest. Was der in seinen eingeschlossen? That would also include euch morin uvden tovin. Also the masters, tzaddikim, also those masters of good deeds, avodas hamitzvos, the service of mitzvahs, canal, as mentioned earlier. V is shaykh, so how does it apply? As euch in der avodah mugbelas canal. That also in this above mentioned limited avodah, we're talking about mitzvahs, so sein der öfter in lemenucha, how could it beat that achievement of without any rest? Was weißt du von Indian from Bligvul, which points to an aspect of a limitless. So therefore, we must say, as an Indian on the Maila from Bligvul, that also mitzvahs there is an advantage of Bligvul. It has to have, also has that advantage that there is a limitless in the level of mitzvahs. Because their meat is moving, their time from their girsa tzaddikim. That's why we also understand the reasoning why tzaddikim, even though we're talking about mitzvahs, but also them in lemenucha, because there's something bligvul about them as well. So here the Rebbe is going to say that possibly from the halacha that you're mevatel Talmud Torah for a mitzvah that you can't do to other people, so maybe that must mean that a mitzvah is greater. So mitzvah has to have bligvul, because otherwise, why would the mitzvah override Talmud Torah? And the Rebbe learns with the Rebbe's chiddush, the Rebbe brings down in several places that if you're not mevatel, it's not because mitzvah is greater, it's because Torah, in order for it to accomplish, it has to come down to mitzvah. So it's actually the Rebbe's medayik from the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, that if you're not mevatel, it's a chesron in Torah, not because mitzvahs are greater. Let's look inside. Hey, is done, or we can say as der din mevatlin Talmud Torah mitnei mitzvah she'efshel la'asos al yidei acherim. But this halacha that you stop Talmud Torah because of a mitzvah that cannot be done through others is machriach zu zogun, that must tell us, because you're mevatel the Talmud Torah, that has to be in mitzvahs also a level of limitless. Because if they're only limited, wie können sie Deuche sein Talmud Torah azavos is bligvul? So how could they override Talmud Torah, something which does have a limit, which is limitless? So we must say that mitzvahs have a limitless also, because since they override Torah, and we push away Torah because of mitzvahs. But the Rebbe explains that the fact that we stop learning Torah is not because mitzvahs are greater, because if we don't stop, that would be a cheson in the Torah that we learn. But that would not be evidence as oich mitzvahs sein in bebchinas b'ligvul, that also mitzvahs are in the level of b'ligvul. Weil das was mevatel in Talmud Torah shu nei mitzvah she efshel la'asos al derech chedim. Because this that we say that we negate and we give up the study of Torah because of a mitzvah which you can't do through others is nit mitzad mailas hamitzvahs. That's not because of the specialty of mitzvahs, nor der far was durch dem heder in kiyum hamitzvahs vert achison in the Torah, but because when you're lacking observance of mitzvahs, there is actually a lacking in the study of Torah. So it's not because of the greatness of mitzvahs, which would make it greater than the b'ligvul, than the Torah must be level, but it's because of the lacking, if you didn't override it, lacking of the Mitzvah. Come on. The Rebbe is going to prove this from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. But the Alter Rebbe is in town from Oben the Mountain Din. The Alter Rebbe says, with regards to the reason about the above mentioned halacha, Yafsik Talmudei v'yase ha-mitzvah, that the person should interrupt his studies and he should do the mitzvahs kizeh kol ha'odam, because this is what the person is, meaning the total creation. Why is a person? Stop learning and do the mitzvahs. Because the Chachamim tell us tachlis chochma tshuva. The ultimate goal of chochma, the goal of learning of chochma, is tshuva ma'asim tovim, is tumasim tovim. V'im eino hisekeh, if the person does not do the tshuva ma'asim tovim, nimtzo, so it turns out shalom lasis, that he learned, not that he didn't do, but he learned not to do. The noich lechulu, it's better that he wouldn't be born. So you see over here that when you don't do the mitzvah, there's a chisor in his Torah. The Baal does know the Alter Rebbe zog them tam chiyuvi. Since after the Alter Rebbe gives the positive reasoning, if yafsik Talmud v'yasa mitzvah, that you should interrupt the Talmud and do the mitzvah kizekol, this is what a human being was created for, to mekayim zayin mitzvahs, to do mitzvahs. Is there moishe? And then he adds, and if he didn't do so, nimtza shalom lasis, it turns out that he learned not to do this haste. As on the kiva mitzvahs, the limud is after zayin. So really, which means that if you don't do the mitzvahs, then your study of Torah is as it should be. Is mashma, it appears as the tam kizekol ha'odom. That reason alone, this is the person, man, that to do the mitzvahs by his creating it is nit genug as to leave them zol the mitzvah zayin Talmud Torah. That's not sufficient for the mitzvah to override the Talmud learning Torah. Because let it be taka true, while it's true that the person is to do mitzvahs, as kim is kolam eldom from deswegen dik, but yet zayin dik adover mukbal, but since it's still a limited Kennes nicht durch sein als Sach. Teure was illegal. You cannot push away Teure which is limitless. Der Father is an alter Rebbe Meisiv. That's the alter Rebbe adds. If he doesn't do so, turns out that he learned not to do so. There's a problem with his learning. But just because the Tachlis Odom is mitzvahs cannot override learning Torah, which is Blikvul. But the reason is because the Alter Rebbe has to add, because his Torah would be not a proper Torah. Thus, he's as kiyama mitzvahs of Zekol Odom. The observance of mitzvah, which is the person, they're Odom in Ganzen, all of the person, which means all of the person, all of the person, even the person's intellect. As the Chacham say, Tachlis. Tachlis means the goal, but it also means the wholesomeness. But Tachlis meant the shleimus from Chochmah. What is the wholesomeness? What is the completeness and fullness of the level of Chochmah Torah? Is Tshuva Ma'asim Torah. So it turns out that even the learning and the Chochmah is for Tshuva Ma'asim Tovim. As Kiyama Mitzvahs is the Tachlis Shleimus from Chochmah. Now that we're saying that the observance of the mitzvah is the ultimate goal and wholesomeness of Chochmah, that says Torah, is he main Hosekain? If he doesn't do so, Nimtza Shalomad, that he learns like it by the Balda Dosis, Shaloi Lasis, because it's in a way not to do. So if you're learning and you're not doing it, and you're not doing the ultimate, all the Odom is, Tachlis is for Tshuva Ma'asim Tovim, so you're missing in your learning. But we don't know that mitzvahs are b'ligvul. No, mitzvahs could still be b'ligvul. And that's why that's the Tachlis that would not be sufficient to override learning Torah, because Torah is b'ligvul. But the reason why Torah overrides mitzvahs override Torah, because the purpose of Torah itself is in order Tachlis Chochmah is Ma'asim Tovim, and otherwise your learning is not Kidduboy. And the Rebbe explains now while that in Torah and mitzvahs there's two parts. There is the limited part of that specific mitzvahs, but then the mitzvah is also, which we have all the mitzvahs, which is a general mitzvah. Yeshleimar and the beer in them, you can say, what is the explanation? Beer is in mitzvahs in mitzvahs there are two aspects. As we say as we see in the language of the version of the mitzvahs. Chelek unsada shover, there is a part and an equal, which is by all. And the tzad shover, the common denominator, is a aleph. So there is a common denominator by all mitzvahs. Asher kiddishonu b'mitzvayso. He sanctified us with his mitzvahs. And then we have the specific, detailed part of the mitzvah, and he commanded us mitzvah ploinis to do whatever that mitzvah, the specific mitzvah. So, what does this mean? Aleph. Every mitzvah had his own separate, designated boundaries. Was tailing up a mitzvah from the other mitzvah that separate one mitzvah from the other mitzvah. Because of these boundaries, the mitzvahs are in a level of limit. Each one is different, base. And then you have the tzad hashav v'osidoyin ala mitzvahs. You have the common denominator, which is in all mitzvahs. Because of that, they are on the level of limitless. Those haste. This means the different details that exist in every mitzvah. Was durchseis ois geteilt a mitzvah legabe andere mitzvahs. Through those details, one mitzvah is separated, differentiated, different than the one mitzvah relative to the other mitzvahs. In in them, it is expressed the limitation that exists in mitzvahs. But the nekuda haklolis was given sich in all mitzvahs, but that general point that exists in all mitzvahs was the Allah seine mitzvah von Loshen Tzivu. They are all mitzvah, they are commands. Das heißt, which means they're commands that Ratzon Elyon Baruch. That is the wishes, the will of the Supreme Blessed Being. Was his Paran gleicher hate in alle mitzvahs, which exists equally in all mitzvahs. But der Ebershtes Ratzon was in the mitzvahs is hecher von Zeir Hagbolus. Hashem's will in the mitzvahs is higher than the limitations on his chalkus and divisions. As our sages of blessed memory say, don't sit and weigh the mitzvahs of Torah chulu, kalosh bekalis, the light one of the lighter ones, and chamuras bechamuras, and the more stringent one amongst the stringent one chulu. Don't weigh because they're all Ratzon Hashem. That's the general theme of the mitzvah. Mitzad der klolos de kenekudei mitzvahs. Because this general point of mitzvahs, the Ratzon Elyon Baruch Hu, the wishes of the Supreme Blessed Being, that is applicable, they're limitless. And furthermore, or noch more than this. So as you do it at time, it's known the reasoning. One who is occupied in doing a mitzvah is exempt from another mitzvah. Weil alle mitzvahs einen kolul eine von der andere, because all mitzvahs are included one from the other. Azoi, as when man is mekayim in mitzvahs, to an extent, in such a way that when you fulfill one mitzvah, is as me'ain. It is somewhat of gleichzeitig as at the same time you will be mekayim fulfilling even alle andere mitzvahs, all other mitzvahs. But this is mitzvah dem rotzen ha'atzmi mitzvahs. That is because of the essence, the will. I want you to doing something from the rotzen, the essence of Hashem's will, beyond which is above the expression of what specifically was the hecher from his chalku, which is beyond, higher than this separation. Come the so it turns out, as even when you are preoccupied in a specific mitzvah, hagam as mitzadi the product. So although because of the details, it is separated and it's different from other mitzvahs, from deswegen and yet, through it, you have a connection to mitzvahs in general that believable was in say this limitless which is in them. Ches. So this is mitzvahs from the perspective what the mitzvahs are. Mitzvahs have limitations, but mitzvahs are also part of a command. Doing one mitzvah is at the same time as if doing all mitzvahs. And therefore, this also extends to the person that does the mitzvah, to the Gabra. The mitzvahs alone, just as it is, as it relates to the mitzvahs themselves, the chefza. The same thing as it relates to the observance of the mitzvah through the Yid Gabra. Hagam der Chiyuv von jeder mitzvah bazunder ist taka mugbal in zman v'chulu. Although the obligation of every mitzvah separately is taka limited in a time kinal siveis, as I said before, siveis. So it seems like mitzvahs are limited. Is oberdo achiyuv tamidi, but yet there is a constant obligation of the Yid in the avodah of mitzvahs v'chaluso. There is a constant obligation in the general service of mitzvahs. A person has to always do mitzvahs. Uvi Chazal zogen in Mishnah, as Chazal say in the Mishnah, Ani nivreis l'shamash es koini. I was created to serve Hashem. That's a general theme which is always. Yeah, the Regava said is b'matzah for nivreisi. At any point in which he's in a situation I was created, Das heißt, jeder Regap mentions Kiyum, every instant from the existence of the human is to live tafkid or tachlis l'shamash koine, is because of the job, the obligation, and the goal to serve Hashem. Wie gesagt früher, as we said earlier, kizeh kol ha'adam. This is all. Everything that the person does is the shamash koine. Bis to the psagdin b'shem shulchan aruch, to the extent that we also, not just when we do actually the mitzvahs, but as the Shulchan Aruch rules, even when you're not actually doing a mitzvah, but you're doing masechosh l'shem shemayim, and also know Hashem in all your ways. So that means that the person is always in the service of Hashem. So while the mitzvah has its time, each mitzvah, but the general obligation of the person is always to be involved in mitzvahs. Them alam is verstandig. So according to all the above, it's understood the chilik zwischen the zwei girsoy is the difference between the two versions, shittos or views. Mitzad the mugbel dike pratim in the mitzvahs because of the limited details of the mitzvahs. So then is nor talmid chachamim ein lam, only talmid chachamim don't have it. Aber mitzat klolos mitzvahs, but when you talk about the mitzvahs in general, was his bleak rule that is also limitless, is alle tzaddikim. Then not only talmidei chachamim, because mitzvahs have the bleak rule part in them. So all the tzaddikim, kolil modern uvdim tovim, which would include masters of good deeds, they too ein laham menucha. So Rebbe is going to quote now, is you still needing explanation because we see that the reason why the Ein Lahem Menucha, okay, we explained Tzadikim, Chachamim, but why is it that Ein Lahem Menucha? It's explained, and it looks like that's associated to the occupation in Torah because they're always learning Torah. How does that fit? Yes, mitzvahs have believable as well, not only Torah, but specifically it says Ein Lahem Menucha because they're occupied in the Torah. So how do we translate that when it comes to mitzvahs? We still require explanation of this matter. It is explained elsewhere as der tam was talmidei chachamim davke ein lahem menucha. What is the reason that davke talmidei chachamim v'lo ba'olam haba, not in this world and not in the world to come, is with the Arizal zokt in Lekutei Hashas. So that's how the Arizal Chlan Levacha says in Lekutei Hashas. B'zeh soit yetze adam lepoloi. This means that the secret of the pasuk in Tehillim says a person goes out to his work in the morning when the sun shines, works the evening. So he translates it into also in the meaning of the future, that a person goes out to the work to occupy in the Torah to what he did to his work, the work that a person worked in this world in Esek HaTorah. He goes out when after 120 years, when he leaves his body, he goes out to the work that he has done. When a person leaves this world, he first goes out to his work to occupy himself in Torah, and that he worked in this world in his Esek HaTorah. That's his work. That's where he's going to. When the Far is nor Talmidei Chachamim ein lam menucha be'olam haba. And that's why Talmidei Chachamim don't have menucha, because they have a work that they've done, they've learned, and that's what they're doing. Al in Gan Eden v'hinder Adam is yoytze von Olam Hazeh, because in the Gan Eden where a person is leaving Olam Hazeh is shaykh nor the b'china Paul ifnei Torah. Over there, it only applies the level of occupation, which is the occupation of Torah. We need the pulei from Kima mitzvahs, and not the actions the occupation of observance of mitzvahs. So, like them is nicht verstandig, the Girse von Tzadikim. So, we still don't, now we don't understand the version of Tzadikim, ein lehem menucha. Hey, nemes aderinim von aliyas on aso. Let it be true that this concept of the elevation without an end is shaychus, in shaychus to mitzvahs, as it relates to mitzvahs. Because also mitzvahs have this idea of ligvul, as explained in general mitzvahs, the Ratzon Elyon. So it is connected with ligvul. But how could we say that the reason they don't have menucha in the world to come is that's to leave them is because the person goes out to the work of so that he's going into what? To doing mitzvahs. In Gan Eden is doch mitot der poli. But in Gan Eden there's no such thing as poli. From kirma mitzvahs. There's no mitzvahs there. So how are we going to explain? Yes, we explain tzaddikim, because also mitzvahs, marin, balud, and tovim have an idea of ligvul, but the ligvul expresses itself in lepaloi, and they're going to continue. But the lepaloi, there's no mitzvahs in Eilam Haba. What exactly is meant with Eilam Haba? The Rebbe explains. Eilam Haba could mean also Eilam Atchiyah. We're going to go through several different steps over here in Eilam Atchiyah. In Gan Eden Taka, there is no mitzvahs, but in Eilam Atchiyah, we'll see there's two periods, as the Rebbe was going to develop this idea over here. Is the bir in them, so you do as in Vort Eilam Haba and Edot Seperush. The word Eilam Haba, there are two interpretations. Aleph Gan Eden, one means in Gan Eden, in heaven. Und es wird angerufen Eilam Haba. Why do we call it the world to come? Not because it's in a later time, but it comes after this world. The person spends the time in this world, then they come to the person after living in this world. And Beis Eilam Haba is a world which is not here yet. That's Eilam Atchiyah, the world of resurrection. So according to this, we can say, as the Pirush for Eilam Haba in them Maimer Hazal. So how are we going to interpret what it means? How are we going to translate Eilam Haba? Is totally in the Tzvei Girsois that hinges on the two versions. If we say Talmidei Chachamim, so that's unique to Talmid Chacham is Eilam, is Gan Eden. Was das is mitzad the Meile from Torah. That talks about the advantage of Torah Talmidei Chacham. Wird mit Eilam Haba gemeint euch Gan Eden, means Gan Eden also Gan Eden, because that's where the Talmidei Chachamim shine, and that's where they go from level to level. Only Talmidei Chacham. Was dort nicht shaykh nor the poli from Torah nit mitzvahs. In Gan Eden it only applies the Yetzod and the poli, the work of Torah, not mitzvahs. But according to the version that tzadikim and menucha was his koilel oich avedus mitzvahs, which also includes the service of mitzvahs. Is there taich for Eilam Haba? So what is the taich of Haba? In dem Maimer Hazal Eilam Atchiyah. So now we're going to say that it means the world of resurrection. Was demut vet vidra malkumen der Zman from Polo Eicha Mitzvahs, then will be the time of Polo Yetzod and Polo in Eilam Atchiyah also for mitzvahs. Well, that's not so pashut. So what are we trying to say? That Yetzod and Polo, that the Arizal talks about in Likutei Hashas, which Polo means Davke Torah, that is according to the Girsa Talmidei Chachamim. And we're talking about the Ma'ila of Torah. But if we say Tzadiki, we're talking about the Ma'isa. We're not talking about Eilam Haba, about Gan Eden, because that would not apply to mitzvahs. But Lefoloi, the act of mitzvahs in Eilam Atchiyah. But in Eilam Atchiyah, is there mitzvahs over there? That's going to be a whole other discussion. There's two periods in Olam Atchiyah, and the first period there is, second period there is. Let's see inside. Yudal. We can ask. Aleph, number one, Razal Zogendoch, our sages of blessed memory say that mitzvahs b'deilus lost and love it, that mitzvahs will be nullified in the future. And the Alter Rebbe touched when is lost and love it, that it means to Tchis HaMesim, there will be no more mitzvahs. Beis, number two, says Mavur B'kam Mekoyim Chasidus. It's explained in many areas of Chasidus. Ados was Razal Zogun Tzadikim Ein Lahem Menucha Chulu. The fact that which our sages of blessed memory say, Tzadikim don't have rest, and you're always going up from one level to the other one. Wer termint gemeint the aliyas in Gan Eden. That is meant the elevation in Gan Eden. So that's a known in Chassidus that's the Ein Lamenucha. Aber La'asud Lavoi wird sein as man from Shabbos. Menucha is going to be a time of rest and Menucha. Euch von Aliyah is also from elevation. So wie ist das Masim with the Meibung Gesonten Hezber? How does this fit with the explanation that Lepoloi means the mitzvahs that will be done La'asud Lavoi? As Leut der Girsa Tzadikim Ein Lamenucha Chul Be'el Mabo. And according to that Girsa, Ein Lamenucha Be'el Mabo, redt sich doch nicht wegen Gan Eden. We are not discussing over here the Gan Eden, but Olam Atchiyah is the beer in them. So the Rebbe is going to say there's two periods in Olam Atchiyah. There's man from Olam Atchiyah Gufa Bashteit und Seit Kufas. The time of Olam Atchiyah consists of two seasons, two times. The Ershtet Kufa, the first season, is the Vasev Ir Zogt Yeder It. About every year we say V'shom Nasil Fanecha Chulu Kimisvus Ritzenecha. We'll do for you as you have instructed, like the mitzvahs. Tzvedamul Zayin Kima mitzvahs, and then it will be the fulfillment of mitzvahs. B'meila Oich the Aliyahs was through them, and therefore also the elevation that take place through mitzvahs. Unat Tzveitet Kufa was done with Zayin mitzvahs B'teilus, and a second period, a second season in which the mitzvahs will be bottled. From the Rayis of them, what's the evidence? Says Yadua was Razal Zogun. It's known. I mean, now we're saying two seasons, so that's what the answer is. So there's mitzvahs at one season, and the Betelim is the other season. Those are Razal Zogun. As in the future, Moshe Rabbeinu will be with us. But Makriv and Karbonis, that you will offer Karbonis Kima Mitzvahs. So be to fulfill the mitzvahs. Befrat, as Klolus so Inyan for Makriv and Karbonis, that the general idea of Karbonis is what is the Inyan for Aliyah. That's elevation. The Allah from Chayza Behemes Melmailo, Melmatla Mailo, which is Mevur Bekam Mekoymis. Sagt man doch, also ich noch Tchis HaMesim mit sein der Inyan von Mitzvahs Valiyas Chulu, will be the elevation because Moshe and Aaron will be there, and they will be. So that means that there is going to be two periods within Tchis HaMesim itself. La'asud Lavi will be the time of Kima Mitzvahs of the Karbonis, which is also a year of Aliyahs. Okay, so that's why there's two periods. So it's not a question that it says mitzvahs betelis la'asud lavai, and the ein lamenucha will mean in the level of mitzvahs. But you basically it's still not explained. Ein lamenucha meint doch as the aliyahs for tzadikim kuma for kiseder on shum hefsek. What does it mean? There is no rest. It means that there is a constant elevation without an interruption. Based on the just mentioned explanation. What does it mean? That it's talking about a period in the Olam Atchiyah. Let it be the first one. But there's an interruption with the Gan Eden part. So it turns out there is an interruption of Menucha during the time of Gan Eden. This is the Todah Pole of mitzvahs, when there is no Pole of mitzvahs. What's Tvishin Elam Hazan, Elam Atchiyah, which is in between this world and the world of Tchiyah, the Elam, the Gan Eden. Is that's boring them, the explanation. So the question becomes, it's not constant, because while we say that it will be in the first part of Olam Atchiyah, but what with the part that passed? I guess the second part is not a problem, that it's going to stop there, because it only talks up to up till the first part of Olam Haba, first part of Olam Atchiyah. But that middle part, the part of Gan Eden, if we should say that there's no paloi over there, there's no mitzvahs, the maisim tovim, there's no continuous growth over there, it's not ein lamanuch, it's not constant. It's das bar in them. So what's the explanation? So it's a früher gerät. We spoke earlier as asis a mitzvahs is shaykh not in elam hazim and the neshama is only that when can you do mitzvahs only in this world when the neshama is dressed in a body? Or when the neshama is in Gan Eden, or when the soul is in Gan Eden on a goof or out of body, is the shaykh that way for mitzvahs, then it does not apply. There's no void of mitzvahs under far, and that's why in Geder Fun, in the boundaries on in Shaykhs and as connects to the Aveda for modern Udin Tov and Tzaddikim, as it relates to the service of the masters of good deeds, which is Tzaddikim. Because the Aveda can gemol zayin, that can only be imagined, you can only attribute it only Nordam and the Neshama is Zamit and Guf, only when the soul is together with the body. Is there's man from the neshama lea guf? So therefore, the time when the neshama is without a body, v'aziz began Eden, nitke mitzias. It's not a mitzias. It's not called an interruption. It's not like she's there and she doesn't experience it. It's not there. In Klora Verta, speaking this out more clearly. Kima mitzvahs verbunden memela muzar haben kima guf. Fulfillment of mitzvahs is tied, and therefore you must have existence of the body. And when the guf is not kayim, and when the body does not exist as a guf l'nishmosi, as a body to his soul, is euch nit shayich zogen be'metzias azman. So you can't say there's time. There's time there that is not there. It's no existence. Azoi as those was the neshamas in the mori udin tovim. To the extent that when the souls of the masters of good deed, hobenit ken aliyas, they don't have any elevation during the time that they find themselves in Gan Eden. That is not referred to as an interruption, as a break, as a rest from their aliyas, because it's just non-existent. And the Rebbe finds now a Ragachover to explain, giving explanation to this idea. That the Ragachover, a dogma dazu, is an example for this. The Ragachover sagt, Ragachover says, as is the Chayich came hisof in Zman, that you can't add in time when the Neshama is Lamailo, when the soul is above. Das heißt, that means, the Shas is when nifsek der Chibur, from the Neshama mit dem Guf, when there is an interruption of that connection of the soul with the body. When the neshama is oiling Gan Eden and the soul goes up to heaven, is demult in ir Welt nitot der ganze Inyan von Zman. So then it does not consist the whole idea of time in Batzuk to Dinei Torah as it relates to the laws of Torah. So without having a neshama with a body, so the laws of Torah is no longer applies to them. There's no time over them. Hagam as is yefaran shaykhs to schara mitzvah isra Torah. Although there is that level, time as it relates to the reward for mitzvahs, the occupation of Torah, but not to the laws of Torah, to the time. This is Yadu when there is such a thing as midnight in Gan Eden, but not as it relates to the body.